Hello, this is part 65, preparation for exam NSE4 Fortinet. And we are talking about firewall authentication. Radius server overview. Radius server authentication is a type of remote server authentication, and Radius is much different from LDAP authentication because there is no directory tree structure to consider. Radius is a standard protocol that provides authentication, authorization, and accounting services. Authentication, authorization, and accounting services are AAA services. We also studied that in CCNA course, and here it's similar to how it is done in Cisco. When a user is authenticating, the client, FortiGate, sends an access request packet to the Radius server. The reply from the server is one of the following. First type, access accept. It means that the user credentials are okay. Or access reject, which means that the credentials are wrong. Or access challenge, which means that the server is requesting a secondary password, ID, or token or certificate. This is typically the reply from the server when we are using two-factor authentication. Not all Radius clients support the Radius challenge method. And configuring a Radius server on FortiGate, we can configure FortiGate to point to a Radius server for server-based password authentication through the Radius server page. We can find it using graphical user interface. Go to User and Authentication, then choose Radius Servers. Here we can put name, authentication method, default or specify, NES IP, include in every user group or not. Then there is a primary server IP or name. Setting is the IP access or fully qualified domain name of the Radius server. The primary server secret setting is the secret that was set up on the Radius server in order to allow remote queries from this client. Backup servers with separate secrets can be defined in case the primary server fails. Note that the FortiGate device must be listed on the Radius server as a client of that Radius server, or else the server will not reply to queries done by FortiGate. The authentication method setting refers to the authentication protocol that the Radius server supports. Options include CHAP, PAP, MS-CHAP, and MS-CHAP2. If we select default, FortiGate will use PAP, MS-CHAP, and CHAP in that order. Unlike LDAP configurations, the test connectivity button used on this example where we go to user authentication radius server, and at the bottom we can see test connectivity button. We can also slide it, test actual user credentials, but like LDAP, we can also test this using command line interface. So we can use both graphical user interface and command line interface to test connectivity. The include in every user group option adds the radius server and all users that can authenticate against it to every user group created on FortiGate. So we should enable this option only in very specific scenarios. For example, when only admins can authenticate against radius server and policies are ordered from least restrictive to most restrictive. How we can test LDAP and radius queries on command line interface? There is a command for LDAP, diagnose test auth server LDAP, then server name followed by username followed by password. And for radius, we use command diagnose test auth server radius followed by server name, scheme, user, and password. So this command is called diagnose test auth server on command line interface. It is used to test whether a user's credentials can successfully authenticate. We want to ensure that authentication is successful before implementing it on any of our firewall policies. The response from the server reports success, failure, and group membership details. Testing radius is much the same as testing LDAP. Diagnose test auth server command on command line interface followed by radius. It shows whether user's credentials can successfully authenticate, and again we should do this to ensure authentication is successful before implementing it on any of our firewall policies. Like LDAP, it reports success, failure, and group membership details depending on the server's responses. Deeper troubleshooting usually requires radius server's access. Note that Fortinet has a vendor-specific attributes VSAs dictionary to identify the Fortinet proprietary radius attributes. This capability allows us to extend the basic functionality of radius servers. We can obtain the Fortinet vendor-specific attributes dictionary from Fortinet knowledge base, which is located at kb.fortinet.com. Two-factor authentication and one-time password. Traditional user authentication requires our username plus something we know, such as a password. The weakness of this traditional method of authentication is that if someone obtains our username, then they need only our password to compromise our account. And since people tend to use the same password across multiple accounts, some sites with more security vulnerabilities than others. Accounts are vulnerable to attack, regardless of password strength. Two-factor authentication, on other hand, requires something we know, such as a password, and something that we have, such as a token or certificate. Because this method places less importance on often vulnerable passwords, it makes compromising the account more complex for the attacker. We can use two-factor authentication on FortiGate with both user and administrator accounts. The user or user group to which the user belongs is added to a firewall policy in order to authenticate. Note that we cannot use two-factor authentication with explicit proxies. We can use one-time password. One-time password is OTP. We can use OTPs as our second factor. One-time passwords are more secure than static passwords because the passcode changes at regular intervals and it is valid for only a short amount of time. Once we use one-time password, we cannot use it again. So even if it is intercepted, it is useless. FortiGate can deliver one-time passwords through tokens, such as FortiToken 200, hardware token, or FortiToken mobile, software token, as well as the email or SMS. To deliver one-time password over email or SMS, the user account must contain user contact information. FortiTokens and one-time passwords delivered through email and SMS are time-based. FortiTokens, for example, generate a new 6-digit password every 60 seconds by default. An NTP server, Network Time Protocol server, is highly recommended to ensure the one-time passwords remain in sync. FortiToken Mobile Push allows users to accept the authorization request from their FortiToken mobile application without the need to enter the additional code. FortiTokens. Tokens use a specific algorithm to generate a one-time password. This algorithm consists of a seed. A seed is a unique, randomly generated number that does not change over time, and the time obtained from an accurate internal clock. Both seed and time go through an algorithm that generates this one-time password or passcode on the token. The passcode has a short lifespan, usually measured in seconds, by default 60 seconds, or it could, for FortiToken 200, possibly more or less for other RSA key generators. Once the lifespan ends, a new passcode generates. When using two-factor authentication using token, the user must first log in with a static password followed by the passcode generated by the token. A validation server, FortiGate, receives the user's credentials and validates the static password first. The validation server then proceeds to validate the passcode. It does so by regenerating the same passcode using the seed and system time, which is synchronized with one or more token. With one of the token system time from NTP server, and comparing it with the one received from the user. If the static password is valid and the one-time password matches, the user is successfully authenticated. Again, both the token and the validation server must use same seed and have synchronized system clocks. As such, it is crucial that we configure the date and time correctly on FortiGate, or link it to the NTP server, which is recommended. Assigning FortiToken to a user. We can add a FortiToken 200 or FortiToken Mobile to FortiGate on the FortiToken page, which is located at User and Authentication FortiTokens. A hard token has a serial number that provides FortiGate with details of the initial seed value. If we have several hard tokens to add, we can import a text file where one serial number is listed per line. As soft token requires an activation code, so note that each FortiGate and FortiGate VM provides 2 free FortiToken mobile activations. We must purchase any additional tokens from Fortinet. We cannot register the same FortiToken on more than one FortiGate. If we want to use the same FortiToken for authentication on multiple FortiGate devices, we must use a central validation server, such as FortiAuthenticator. In that case, FortiTokens are registered and assigned to users on FortiAuthenticator, and FortiGate uses FortiAuthenticator as its validation server. After we have registered the FortiToken devices with FortiGate, we can assign them to users to use as their second factor authentication method. To assign a token, edit or create the user account and select Enable two-factor authentication. On the token drop-down list, select the registered token we want to assign. Thank you.